New year, new session coming up, so lots of excitement. I should introduce myself. I am Andy Mayer. I'm the president and CEO of the Mount Vernon Chamber of Commerce, and I'm the chair of the Skagit Chamber Alliance. The Chamber Alliance, the Skagit Chamber Alliance, is composed of the 6 chambers of commerce in Skagit County. Together, we represent more than 1,800 unique businesses in the county and more in our region. The purpose of our collective effort is to work together for the interests of our members, our communities, and the future of Skagit County. I can't tell which of my fellow CEOs are with us, so I'm going to introduce them, and if they are there, if they please wave their hand. CEO of Anacortes Chamber is Jessica Kaiser. With Burlington Chambers, Steph Vervart. Heather Carter from Wagoner Chamber. Paula Kelly from the Seagull Woolley Chamber. And the Concrete Chamber is part of our group as well. Maybe not part of our group, but every bit as important to us. John Sternlicht, the CEO of EDASC, who we partner with regularly, is with us as well. And I think joining us today is the brand new, first week CEO of the Stanwood Chamber, who is Richard Good. I would like to introduce all elected officials, but I have not figured out who they are. So if you are on and you have been so generous to serve in that capacity, please consider yourself welcomed. The way we're going to proceed this morning is that we will go through the legislators by district, and they will take up to 5 minutes to share their legislative priorities and their perspective with us. So after we do that, then it will be open for your questions. When we get there, you can raise your hand virtually, or you can put it in the chat and we'll read your question, whatever works for you. Of course, I remind you to be respectful. These sometimes are contentious times, and we're okay to have differences of opinion, and we should. But of course, let's be respectful of each other's point of view. So again, bear with me because I can't totally see who's here yet and who isn't. But I would like to start with the 10th district. So if Representative Gilday is here, would you be so kind as to start with your thoughts?
Sure, I am here. My name is Greg Gilday. I'm the representative from the 10th Legislative District. And this is going to be my first short session. So I'm pretty excited to actually get to go down and work out of my office in Olympia. It's the first time I'm going to be able to do that, even though it's going to be a virtual session. They're going to allow us to work out of our offices down there. I'm excited for the short session. I hear it's just like the long session, only crammed into 60 days instead of 105. So that should be exciting. While I'm down, I'll tell you what committees I'm on. I'm on the Housing, Human Services and Veterans Committee, the Rules Committee, the Capital Budget Committee, and the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee. And I'll be serving on those again this upcoming session. When I'm down there, I'm going to focus on housing. As you probably know, Washington has a housing crisis. I think it's very bad in Skagit County, I understand. Right now, the studies show that we're about 250,000 housing units short in this state. And it's only going to get worse if we don't do something, because we're expected to get another 1 million people over the next 10 years. And so where are we going to put all those people? We need to increase the supply of housing. And how are we going to do that? There is not one thing that has created this housing situation, and there's not going to be one answer to the problem. We need to have a lot of little fixes that will add up to big changes in the supply of housing. And so some of those will include, personally, I prefer incentives rather than sticks. And so one of the bills that I've sponsored with Rhett Bateman that I will be working on again this year is the real estate excise tax incentive program, which will incentivize localities to increase density by giving them a portion of the state's REAP monies. And I think it can be a win-win situation to increase density, especially close to transit, where we can take advantage of existing transit lines and get it close to infrastructure so we can leverage the existing infrastructure instead of having to build out new sewer water lines and things like that. There's going to be a lot of other housing bills that go through the legislature this year that I'll be working on. But what it comes down to for me is it's got to increase the supply, because without that increase of supply, the housing, whether you're talking home purchases or whether you're talking rentals, is not going to do anything to relieve the increases that we've seen in housing prices over the last number of years. So those are the big things that I'll be working on. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you, Representative Gilday. We'll hold off on the questions till later, but I'm sure that that there will be some. Absolutely. Let's go, please, to Representative Paul.
Thank you, Andy. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Excellent. Thanks so much for hosting this. And I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this event. This is always a fun event and really helpful to hear what your priorities are. I appreciate getting that ahead of time, and happy to chat about what I'm working on. I see so many friends and colleagues on the call, and it's so nice to see everybody. I'm Dave Paul. I represent the 10th District. My family and I live in Oak Harbor, but I also work at Skagit Valley College. So I work with many of you on both the Mount Vernon campus and the Oak Harbor campus. And I also am the college's representative on the Island County Economic Development Council. And I've worked closely with John with EDESC, with the Skagit County Economic Development Council. And, you know, my work at the college has really framed my work as a legislator. So we want to help provide opportunities for thriving and equitable communities where everybody has the opportunity to be prosperous. And when we talk about those thriving communities, that's, you know, we're taking a really holistic approach, making sure we've got great K-12 education systems and community colleges and university systems in trades, healthcare, and a clean environment in a strong business community. So the work I'm doing that I think really aligns with your priorities this year, I'm very concerned about making sure that we're helping our young people and folks that have stepped out of the workforce be able to engage in the workforce. So my work on the College and Workforce Development Committee, that's one of the three I serve on, is really focused on considering ways of having apprenticeship programs, connecting students with our skill center, the Dave Quall Skill Center on the Mount Vernon campus, with our community technical colleges and our apprenticeship programs in our valley, and in our universities, and how that leads to family wage jobs. And considering ways of helping to engage students so that they're perhaps doing paid internships at your businesses in the summer and then earning their 2-year degree or their 4-year degree during the academic year. That's, I think, a really great model, as you mentioned in your priorities, with a tourism economy and in the heavy traffic we see of visitors in the summer. And so that gives you a flexible workforce in the summer where we're actually getting them trained to do even more important work once they're done with their degree. I think you folks talked about mental health. That is so critical in our community. We do not have enough mental health providers in rural counties like Skagit and Island County. And so I have been working with local officials and pediatric and healthcare officials to think about ways of expanding how we might think about mental health services, perhaps increase the amount of peer counseling that might be available, and getting more clinical supervisors in our community so that as folks are earning their mental health credentials, they could be actually working in our community and serving our students, young people, and across all age ranges. And then I'm Also working on expanding dual credit that's running start in college and the high school, and career and technical offerings at our K-12 schools, and making sure that their cost and the fees and tuition and book costs aren't a barrier for students participating in that. It's really sad that Running Start's a great program, and we'll have folks that graduate from Skagit Valley College and their high school on the same day in June, and the white middle class families are almost twice as likely to participate in that program, and we need to get the information out more about that. At the same time, we have great college and high school programs which students can do while they're at Mount Vernon High School or Cedar Woolley High School, and there are barriers to students participating in that. We need to reduce those barriers and help strengthen those great programs. I work with Mount Vernon American government teacher. It's been a great experience being in her classroom and her being in mine, and figuring out ways of strengthening both of our the ways that we teach our classes. So that's what I'm working on this upcoming session. I also serve on the College of Workforce Development Committee. And the Community and Economic Development Committee that focuses a lot on broadband, which I know is important to our community, and the Transportation Committee. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Andy.
Thank you, Representative Paul. We appreciate it. Senator Mazzal, your turn, please.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning. I'm State Senator Ron Mazzal. I live here in Whidbey Island, and with my family, we farm here and have for the last 112 years now. We have a farm, but we are vertically integrated, and we direct market all of our products directly to the consumer, either through grocery stores or through our own. We have our own store here, Three Sisters Market, Whidbey Island. We have about 10 employees besides 4 family members who work in the operation. So I sit on Health and Long-Term Care Committee. I am the ranking member there. I sit on Ways and Means and also Rules Committee. I am also vice chair of the caucus. We have our individual responsibilities in the caucus. My primary responsibility is health and long-term care. We have a number of bills, agency requests, otherwise, as far as health and long-term care. I'm also working on some other as well, as far as patients' medical records and their availability to the patient, and especially to their provider when it comes to telehealth. Been very involved in the telehealth sector for the last 2 years. Little do we know how important that would be. There are a number of concerns as we go forward in the session, and it'll be interesting to see which of those rise to the top. Very concerned about our homeless situation, which is largely a relationship of our mental health and substance abuse programs, which we need a tremendous amount of investment and concentration on as we move forward. One of my biggest concerns is accountability in state government. I worked very hard with the state auditor's office to bring some level of accountability to Employment Security Department and others, seeing that the constituents' money and resources are spent wisely. I think that's about enough. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Senator Mazzal. We appreciate it. Next is Representative Eslick from the 10th Legislative District. She was going to be with us, but unfortunately she has taken ill. So she did send me a statement, and so please pretend that I am Representative Eslick. Here we go. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you this morning about the issues facing our state. I truly appreciate the opportunity, and I am sorry that I could not participate in person. During the upcoming 60-day legislative session, I will be working with my colleagues to deliver real transportation solutions, make our neighborhoods safe, repeal the ill-conceived long-term care payroll tax, and reduce the cost of housing and childcare. I am co-sponsoring Representative Andrew Barkas's REAL Act, which is a suite of bills that would dedicate general fund revenue to transportation needs instead of raising the state gas tax, require that sales tax revenue on motor vehicles go directly to the preservation and maintenance of infrastructure, and bridge the divide between transportation safety in urban and rural communities. These bills, along with others like Representative Chris Corey's House Bill 1605, that aims to reduce lane departure accidents and fatalities in rural communities, would deliver real transportation solutions to Washington. For too long, drivers, particularly in rural areas, have had to deal with unacceptably dangerous road conditions, leading inevitably to the tragic loss of life. We can do better. Last session, during a rise in crime, the majority party passed two bills, House Bill 1310 and House Bill 1054, that made communities less safe by removing important tools used by law enforcement to de-escalate situations and pursue subjects. Washington already ranks 51st out of the 50 states and DC for the number of officers per resident, and these bills serve to embolden criminals. I, along with many of my colleagues, will be fighting to address the problems created by these policies and give law enforcement professionals the tools they need to make our communities safe. The majority party is trying to delay the implementation of the long-term care payroll tax, which was set to begin on January 1st of this year. I voted against this program, and 63% of Washington voters said they want us to repeal it. We should listen to the voters and repeal this ill-conceived program that unfairly forces residents to pay for insurance that may not make sense for themselves and their families. I am optimistic that we can make progress on these issues and more as we head into the abbreviated session, and I encourage you all to stay involved in the process. Please feel free to contact me with your questions or concerns, and I will do my best to ensure your voice is heard in Olympia. So I am no longer Representative Eslick. Thank you, Representative Eslick, for submitting that. Let's go now to Senator Wagner, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Senator Keith Wagner. I reside in the city of Sedro-Woolley, where I'm sitting right now. And I serve as a ranking member on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. I serve on Ways and Means, and I serve in the Crime and Justice Committees. I'm going to start where the gentleman in the 10th left off with behavioral health crisis that we're all so aware of. And it's one of the areas that I am so proud to have worked on and so pleased to work in a bipartisan and bicameral way. We've made great progress in the terms of capital funding for facilities. I want to thank my neighbors for helping us to get there. We worked to bring money to Skagit County for the Skagit County Behavioral Health Center just outside of Sedro-Woolley. And we worked hard together to enhance and increase the capabilities at the Ditchwallick Center. So those are the types of things where we work so well together in Olympia, and we've got a long way to go, but we have made great progress. Now we need to provide the funds to operate those facilities when they're fully online and to lower barriers into the industry so that we have the people to man them. There's a bottleneck at the state in certification for some of these behavioral health specialists. I have a bill that will allow them to begin work once they have graduated and met their requirements, but may not have made it all the way through the certification process. Because as you may know, if you ever tried to apply for a license or transfer a title, there's always one more thing. And sometimes what you think is a simple certification ends up taking months. That's months of time that we don't have a qualified person providing services to the community. So my bill will allow people to begin work while they get that paperwork collected from their university or wherever they receive their training, and get those people to work helping the citizens of Washington State. I want to talk also a little bit about the public safety crisis that we see. Crimes are up across the board in our state. I think it's a direct result of some unintended consequences of legislation that occurred in the last session. In my own community, property crimes, for example, up 100% since 1 July when that legislation took effect. So I think you can take the data and look at the dates and realize that we did something wrong, or we didn't get it quite right in Olympia. So I'm going to work hard with my colleagues across the aisle to fine tune that legislation that I think went awry. I think it's very positive that the sponsor of some of that legislation understands it wasn't perfect, and legislation often is not perfect on the first go. So it's not a criticism necessarily of what was trying to be done, but we didn't get it right, and we need to go back and fix that, because safe communities are thriving communities, and you are all presumably business people who want to work in a thriving community so you can do your business and make a profit and have a happy life. So I'll be working on those two issues specifically. I think we also need to address the fact that we have a large surplus of funding coming into our general funds. And over the last 3 sessions, there have been 22 tax increases that I can think of. It's time to give some of that money back, or at least quit taking more. We need to be thoughtful about how we spend our surplus. We need to be thoughtful about how we use any federal funds that are coming, although those often come with very specific strings attached. I think we should replenish our rainy day account, as you call it. It's a budget stabilization account. We took some money out of there, rightfully so, for the pandemic. It's time to put that money back now that we have extra dollars. And when we expend those funds, I think we need to be certain that they're on capital projects, so we have something when we're done. And if the money doesn't continue to come, then in lean times in the future, we won't have put that money towards a continuing obligation. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Wagner. Moving to the 40th District, Representative Kanoff is next, but Amanda Hubick, help me, would you please? I think that you are representing, well, temporarily representing Representative Lekanoff. Would you like to say anything on her behalf?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, Andy. Rep. Lekanoff has been working really hard over the last, well, the entire interim, of course, but she's got some incredible bills that have just recently dropped. She is working on a notification system very similar to the Silver Alert system, focused on missing Indigenous women. It's an Attorney General's sponsored bill that's just dropped. So she's super excited about that. We've also been working in our office on salmon recovery, culvert recovery, things that Rep. Lekanoff is well known for. She is continuing her focus there as well. We've been having some really strong conversations with the governor's office around several other bills that I unfortunately apologize, I don't have them in front of me right now, but also super excited to announce that she is getting a full-time LA. Cole Harvey is his name. He wasn't able to be on the call today. There's a ton of training that he's been through, but I will be sending out an email later today to kind of do an e-introduction to everyone so that you've got Cole's information. Rep. Lekanoff is still serving on the same committees this year as she was last year. So she's chair of RDAN, which is the Natural Resources Committee. She's also on appropriations, which is the expenditure part of the budget committees. And she is also vice chair of the state government and tribal relations committee.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Appreciate it. Now, could we go please to Representative Remmel?
Thanks, Andy. I'm Alex Remmel. I represent the 40th District. And before we get too much further, I just want to acknowledge and say thanks to Amanda for doing double duty the last 6 weeks or so after Rep. Wakanoff's LA was elected to serve on the Whatcom County Council. I think all of us in the legislature, one of the first things you realize is how great our staffs are, and how great the teams are. And we would not be nearly as effective as we're able to be without the help of those team members. Amanda in particular in my case, but I think all of us could say the same thing. So I'm this coming year, one of the things that I've heard over and over and over again, talking with folks, is about the importance of addressing cost of living challenges that folks are facing as we enter, the next year, the next phase of the pandemic. And in particular, in my mind, the biggest line item in folks' budget, the biggest thing affecting cost of living is housing. And I appreciate this forum because it's an opportunity to sort of show that this Washington is a little bit different than maybe the Washington, D.C. that you see on the news. There is a lot of bipartisan agreement in the remarks I've heard so far. And that certainly goes for the remarks Rep. Gilday led us off with. I agree with almost everything he had to say about our housing crisis. We absolutely do need to address that, and a big piece of the solution is increasing supply. I would also add that there are some folks that just get left out if we rely only on market rate housing. And so we need solutions that work for folks at all sort of levels of the income ladder. And so along with increasing housing supply, I think we need to ramp up our investments in the Housing Trust Fund, which supports projects like Senator Wagner referenced earlier, the Anacortes Family Center, the Digwallick Treatment and Recovery Center, supportive housing that we were successful in working together to fund last year. Those kinds of projects, and we can do a lot more of those. And especially when we look at budget surplus that we think may be a little bit shaky and especially reliant on one-time federal dollars, those sort of capital construction projects make a lot of sense to me right now. I would raise the transportation budget issue, but I don't want to steal Senator Lovelet's thunder there. We absolutely need to make deep investments in our ferry transportation system, in particular, road and bridge maintenance more broadly. And I will just say I probably want to be associated with everything Senator Lovelet's going to have to say on that in about 1 minute. The other big priority I am tackling this year is climate policy. We made some big steps last year, but there is more to do when we look at the climate fueled disasters that have been affecting our communities this last year. My resolve to continue to take bold and important action to advance a clean energy future is only hardened. So what that looks like for me this year is some big policies related to our buildings. It is absolutely true that it is better to build right the first time, and that especially applies to when we're talking about putting in efficient heating systems in our buildings. I'm also really excited to start to look into the future at what the hydrogen economy can look like. We have opportunities to make some investments in Washington State that will support the development of clean, renewable and green electrolytic hydrogen, and so sponsoring some legislation along those lines. I will pause there and looking forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Rammel. We appreciate it. Senator Loveland, we saved you for last. Would you please proceed?
Oh, thank you so much. So nice to see so many familiar faces, but for those of you I haven't had the pleasure to meet, Liz Lovelet, I am a 5th generation Skagitonian. I live in Anacortes, and I just really appreciate being able to be in front of this group as a former small business owner myself. For any of you who are into music and culture, I owned Anacortes' historic The Business for many years, and it continues to be alive and well down on 2nd Street in Commercial. So I work on a broad portfolio of stuff. I am the Vice Chair of Energy, Environment, and Technology. I am the chair for the Senate of the Ferry Legislator Caucus, where I serve on transportation. And then I'm the local government lead for the Housing and Local Government Committee. Additionally, I serve on Maritime Blue, which is an economic development cluster sector. As an ex officio member, I serve on the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. And I serve with Senator Wagner and Representative Lekanoff on the Skagit Water Supply Task Force. So I really want to echo what my colleagues, Senator Mazzal and Wagner said. We have a very bipartisan delegation here, and with Wagner and Mazzal on Ways and Means and myself on transportation, we really work together to make sure that we are bringing meaningful investments into our community that support people, businesses, and making sure that we're taking care of our natural environment. So few things right off the cuff. I'm going to continue to work on the team to bring a public bank to fruition for Washington State. We have the opportunity to have Washington State tax dollars working for investments for Washingtonians. The primary focus of the bank will be to get resilient infrastructure dollars into our communities, particularly our rural spaces where it's so much harder to get those resources deployed to get big projects done, and additionally to help us with our housing crisis. As for the maritime sector, that's the majority of where the bills that I will be running this year lie. I'm proud to have Senator Mazzal co-sponsoring a derelict vessel removal bill to continue on the work from passage of a bill I did a couple of years ago to ensure that we have the resources necessary to get these sunken treasures out of our waterways, make sure that they're not providing massive environmental damage, and that we're removing them safely and responsibly. I will also be working with Department of Natural Resources on a bill to help do 10,000 acres of kelp and eelgrass remediation in our maritime environments to help make sure that we have the habitat necessary for salmon restoration, for pinto abalone and other native species that have been steadily on the decline, and to help with our ocean acidification crisis. Additionally, I will be helping out with Senator Kaiser, who is running an omnibus apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship bill to help increase employment capacities for folks who are re-entering the workforce. My specific focus will be helping tune the maritime sector. With the ferries being in the situation that they are, and we're the land-based island of sorts. I mean, I get to cross a bridge to get to mine, but I am the terminus for both the San Juan Islands and for the Guimas Ferry. So I've been digging in with our transportation budget leads to make sure that we are getting adequate funding, not only for the short-term crisis in WSF that relates to the staffing issues that we've had, but additionally getting us to a point where we are able to ensure that we are delivering a vessel every other year in perpetuity. Unlike some transportation projects where you might be able to do a one-time expenditure like what we're getting from the federal government, ferries are the gift that keeps on giving. And luckily we have a very dedicated team here, and I want to give a shout out to Rep. Paul and Rep. Rammel, who are my constant allies on this, provide such tremendous leadership in the House to make sure that we have a unified message to the transportation budget chairs that is, we must pay for ferries, we must pay for ferries, we must pay for ferries. It has been the #1 constituent complaint that we have gotten in our office by a mile. Let's see, additionally, and this will be of interest to Matt Gill, I'll be helping with a ecology bill that is to refine oil spill response. My understanding is it's very technical, non-controversial, but want to make sure to flag that for you. And I've been working with a group of national legislators on the potentials of siting offshore wind in Washington state. So there's two pieces with that. Part of it is setting the floor of expectations of what we need in terms of federal concurrency, making sure that we're protecting our megafauna and migratory birds, and making sure that we have the place set for an independent developer that might want to come in and do that. And then the second piece is working on the development of the maritime sector capacity. So making sure that we have the right boats to be able to service that we have the right skill set, and that since we already have such a robust carbon fiber sector in Washington state, that we can continue to be leaders on that. The other big piece that has been alluded to consistently is getting relief to families. So, and seniors, working folks, people that are really struggling right now. When I hear about property crimes being on the rise, I can't help but think that the additional component of that is the desperation that is out there with folks that were already on the margins before the pandemic and now continue to suffer in poverty and in lack of resources. And as we all know in this area, it just gets harder and harder the more rural you are. So with that, I have been working with leads in the health and human service sector to champion a budget proviso that will work, that will have our legislative technology working in the direction of having a single point of entry for social services. Not many members have had the experience of trying to apply for food stamps and other things as I have. And I tell you what, it is a bunch of backflipping through fiery hoops, continuing to prove that you're poor again and again. It is a demoralizing roadshow, and it really doesn't help people climb the ladder out of poverty to help us create what we ultimately all want at this table, which is a robust middle class. And unfortunately, we've moved ourselves to this place where we are blaming poor folks for the reason why maybe some of us might be paying more taxes. And it's pretty disingenuous when we have so much untapped wealth at the top of the wealth ladder that could be going into more robust services for folks. And I'm talking the top 1% here. The numbers are pretty astonishing. I think the rest of the work that I'm doing is trying to help on comprehensive plan and GMA reform. We have a suite of bills that will be coming out of the House that I will be helping with on my end, and then some other work that I'm teeing up for next year to make sure that our development regulations and land use codes at the local level really reflect where we need to go in terms of housing, in terms of environmental stewardship and such. And since I saw Ron McHenry is on the line as well, I wanted to make sure to flag for you that I haven't forgotten about that potential licensure trailer bill that we need on the Fair Start for Kids Act. So be sure to, Jordan's on the line too, so be sure to hit us up so we make sure we've got that covered. Yeah, I've only have coffee in my system, so I feel like I'm talking a million miles a minute, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Senator Lovelet, thank you very much. Let's all have some coffee, shall we? It is time for your questions. You can put them in the chat and I'll read them, or if you want to raise your hand, that will work as well. If you push the raise your hand button, let me remind you that we're having a conversation here for the purposes of information. I mean, we don't have to agree on things, but we do have to get along. So I'll just start. Well, we would prefer to get along. So must be some questions out there. Let me switch views so I can see if somebody raised their hand. It's not the time to be shy. And I can put people on the spot too if I need to elicit questions.
Andy, I think Lyndon has a question.
Good. I can't see that. Please, would you, why don't you speak your question, please?
Thank you. Thank you, John, for seeing me. I am the lone voice in the wilderness crying on two different areas. One, I am the 39th district. Look around us. We have no representation here. In the land of redistricting, I am jealous as I can be as I look at all the representatives here representing the 10th district and the 40th district and whatever. Eastern Skagit County is missing, as you will notice. And we do not have a voice. We do not feel like we have a voice in government. So I put that there. The other lone voice in the wilderness, I am here representing PFLAG Skagit. We look out for the LGBTQ+ community. I am proud to live in the state of Washington because we have excellent anti-discrimination bills, but we remain vigilant that our people, particularly our transgender community, remains a focus, that we have competent health care, adequate health care, and I'm going to shut up right now.
Are there any, would the representatives and senators,
Yeah, I would like to say I'm right here representing the 39th legislative district. So Linda and I, maybe you got on at a different time, but yeah, I try to make all of these, and I'm always available to meet with anybody. I never turn down appointments, phone calls, or anything. So if you feel like you want to reach out to the 39th, I know Representative Eslick is feeling under the weather, or she would have been here also. So please feel free to reach out to my office with your issues, and I'd love to get to know you better.
Thank you.
fantastic, thank you. Ron McHenry, I believe you are next.
Yeah, so mine isn't actually industry specific, probably for the first time in a while, but it is a business concern, and that's on the Long-Term Care Act. Is there any kind of time frame for when we'll have like a final answer? You know, we're coming up on our first payroll and have to make a decision as to whether we're going to withdraw and then refund, or not withdraw from employees and then maybe be on the hook for it ourselves. And I imagine we're not the only business that's trying to deal with this. So any advice, counsel, time frame, information would be really helpful, because it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on this one, because we did just have a briefing with the governor earlier this week with the Senate caucus. So we understand that there's a lot of trepidation out there, because the governor kind of came out at a press conference saying one thing, and then the legislature was saying another, and we kind of put a pause on it to make sure that we can dial it correctly. The reality is that we are facing a crisis where people, there's a lot of misinformation about there about whether or not there is private long-term care insurance and how effective that is, and whether or not it really is helping people in their time of need. And so that is why we put a pause on it, to make sure that we have this calibrated right for folks so that they have the resources that they need at their time. But what I will say is in the near term, my understanding is you probably don't need to be collecting it from your employees. So, and I'm sure my house folks may have a more recent briefing, but that's kind of the lay of the land as we see it.
Andy, do you want me to jump in?
Please.
So, I'm really proud that our state is working on this issue. I hear over and over again from constituents that they want to be able to age at home, and we have constituents with disabilities that they're going to receive better services at home if they can get that assistance. So I'm really proud of this work. I'm going to go stronger than Senator Lovelett. I think the legislature is fully committed to getting this right, and you will see an extension of the implementation window, which means we're not going to start this till July of 23 is what I believe is going to happen. We are advising businesses not to collect the premium, and the legislature is not collecting the premium from its employees. And we get this is challenging because of that communication from the governor, but I think the legislature is very committed, and you'll see an emergency clause that will fix this and extend the deadline for the implementation.
Thank you. Number of people, we will get to everybody here. Starting with question from Lance Calloway. What are your thoughts on moving funds from the operational fund to transportation?
Do it. So Andy, can I speak again? I'm sorry, I just jumped in.
No, please.
This is something Representative Rammel and I and others on the House Transportation Committee, I can't speak for the Senate, but when the economy came roaring back, in many respects, it left transportation behind because folks weren't driving. And so gas tax revenues went down substantially. And so while we had this increase that we've talked about today in operational funds, the transportation budget is in trouble. And transportation is key to our economic development. It's a key part of what our state does. So this is the time to be using operational dollars on transportation and fix that gap until we can get a more sustainable model.
And if I could add to that, first of all, I agree. And now is the time when we have the dollars to do it, to wean ourselves off of gas taxes. One idea that has been presented from my side of the aisle for a couple sessions now is to take the retail auto sales and tie that directly to our transportation. It makes sense in a lot of ways. It may not be quite enough money, but it certainly will be a big boost. But it is automatically increased when inflation increases. It's automatically increased when the population increases. So it's a natural fit, and it's a perfectly connected to our transportation needs. So I think we should start there. And now's the time to do it, when we have extra money as a buffer.
Thank you. Jason McGill, you've been patiently waiting. I know you have a question.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Jason McGill here. I'm the Executive Director for Northwest Youth Services. I don't know if this is so much a question, but I just wanted to make sure that I did plug this. But I believe that when we talk about housing, and I really appreciate Representative Alex Ramal's your comments, and Senator Lovelet, and Representative Gilday, sorry. Housing definitely is a focus for us, and Skagit County is definitely lacking in housing resources for young people in particular. And, I just want to make sure that we can all partner with each other in figuring out the best solutions, because we do need some permanent supportive housing for young people. I know that we're getting some supportive housing for just in general, the population in Skagit County, but in particular, when we talk about prevention and recovery, we really need to have a focus on young people to prevent them from entering into that chronic homelessness world. And I would love to be a partner with you all in that, and what that looks like in Skagit County. And then lastly, Senator Wagner, I would love to see if you're open to a conversation about the policing bill that you were referencing, and definitely have some opinions about that. I'm not sure if we got it wrong, so much as we just need to put a little bit more resources into prevention and recovery. But that's all. Good morning, y'all, again.
Thank you. Responses from our legislators.
I'm happy to hop in just on the youth piece to say, to Lyndon's earlier comment, I mean, we see such a dramatic amount of kids experiencing homelessness that are LGBTQIA, and we want to make sure that those kids have the support they need if they're not getting it in their families. And so that's certainly a focus area. I mean, I'll bring it back to the public bank. There's just not enough dollars out there. We haven't incentivized construction of market rate housing. We have not figured out how to thread the needle on getting enough permanent supportive housing out there. My sense of it is that as we get folks stabilized, that will help open up some of the market rate housing. One of the things that we were briefed on recently was the impact fee deferral program. It's been utilized by Ferndale. They have had this massive explosion of construction up there. We're looking at making that permanent to try to make sure that the developers can make that pencil. So I think that there's a lot of creative ways to get that going. And again, some of this just there's part of it that comes down to land use. I think eventually we're going to get to a place where we're allowing infill density even in our single family areas. So be prepared for that, because I think that that's key. I mean, when you look at a place like Old Town and Anacortes, those plats are tiny. That it wasn't, we had a lot of people crammed onto a block. It wasn't some, wild concept. And so, as we've gentrified, as we have as we work to undo redlining in our communities, especially as it relates to transportation and environmental justice, we got a lot of work to do, but I think there's a lot of people who are really interested in solving these problems and would welcome your collaboration.
I don't want to move too quickly away from housing because it is so important. I want to read Bill Henkel's question. Though the housing crisis is a regional and even national issue, Skagit has the distinction, according to the last two UW rent studies, as having the lowest housing availability of any county in the state. Something is going especially wrong here. The question is, why do you think that is so? And what are the best strategies to address this issue of providing housing that people who work here can afford? I know we're already addressing it, but for emphasis, if anybody wants to say anything more, I would welcome it. That's usually a way to stop the discussion on something and say, I want to hear more.
And
But
Andy,
it's
I'll
so
jump- I'll jump in if that's okay.
Please.
So, you know, since I've been serving the legislature and since I ran 3 years ago, this is housing and mental health and behavioral health are the top 3 issues out here when I talk to voters. And I really appreciate that comment about Skagit County. Island County is right behind. This is a regional issue that we do not have enough housing stock. And given the population growth that I think Rep. Gilday talked about, we need to plan for that. And I am excited that we're getting that message across to leaders in Olympia and in elsewhere in the state that did not understand 3 years ago that how critical this issue is. I think the Great Recession nationally decimated construction of new homes, and we're recovering from that now. I think some of our partners in cities like Mount Vernon and Oak Harbor are doing a good job with the infill. We need to help support that and then look at smart ways of protecting our quality of life, but filling in with multifamily homes, looking at alternatives that still help protect our quality of life. But I do think this has really gotten the attention of folks in Olympia and in King County that, and I'm especially impressed. Representative Johnson, who represents the federal area, talks a lot about the cost of development for builders, and within our caucus addressing that, I think that oftentimes that doesn't get heard. And so I think there is growing movement for trying to fix this for communities like ours.
Thank you. Rocio Lopez has been waiting a long time to ask a question. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to put on the radar that House Bill 1802 has been pre-filed, and what it is regarding is disability rights and having people who have disabilities being more included in committees and focus groups. And so it's just something that's really important to our community. It's you know, having our voice in Olympia and participating in legislation. But I also feel that it's really important when it comes to education, especially special education, and helping our youth, K through 12, getting the resources they need to be successful through grade school. So it's just something I wanted to put on the radar. My hope is that it's a unanimous vote support for 1802, considering it is a bill regarding a voice for the disability community. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any thoughts from our legislators?
Yes, sir.
Rocio.
I just want to say that did I step on you, Alex? Go ahead.
No, you go for it. I'll follow you up.
I just want to say, if anything good has come out of the last 2 years of the pandemic, it's this, what we're doing right now. And I think it's an important tool that when we quote go back to normal, that we don't lose the ability for people to remotely testify in the way that we've been able to expand it through the use of Zoom. The Senate had some very limited remote testimony where you had to go to a certain library or school that had the facilities, but now we've learned how to do it like this. And this is going to be a tool that helps everybody, but in particular, people with disabilities who maybe don't have the ability to travel or come to Olympia to testify. So I think this is a good tool, and I'm glad that you're engaged, and hopefully you will interact with us either in person or using Zoom meetings.
Oh, I have. I've definitely started learning how to testify. So, and especially with me having a disability, I was born with cerebral palsy. So this issue is nothing new to me. It's just been more exciting these past few years to see bills come along and being passed.
Thanks, Rocio, for all of your advocacy on behalf of this community. It's really important to have folks like you with a voice speaking up. I'm looking at 1802 right now. It's in our introduction sheet for today. We've got the opportunity to co-sponsor until early next week. So I'll take a close look at it, but anticipate working with you in support of these kind of policies. Thanks.
Kay Pearson, you've been waiting for a while. What is your question, please?
Thank you, all the legislators, for your service. First of all, someone who's been there, I truly appreciate what you're doing. My question to you is regarding the capital budget. We're looking at expanding our 211 and suicide crisis line. And when is the best time to get to you our capital budget request?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
As soon as
Or
possible.
February.
You'll hear it today.
Yeah, there will be, I mean, luckily, because of the nature of last year's session, they really streamlined the process for getting capital budget requests in, which has made it a lot simpler for both us and staff to manage. And like I said, we do work as a delegation. So like, I work with House members to make sure that we're covering our bases. I work with Senator Wagner and Mazzal to make sure that we're doing what's right for Skagit County and beyond. So now's the time.
Perfect, thank you.
Ron McHenry, your question, please.
Yeah, it's a request, and I can't believe I forgot to do this earlier, but any encouragement that our legislative delegation could provide to DCYF, DOH, and OSPI regarding guidance on COVID and updating it. It's, we're still operating under guidance like from June and July, and it's really tying us up in things. And we have tried, us, the WISE, other youth development providers, SOA, have really tried to push for some updates, and they just keep pushing back. I'm telling you, we're 1 week to 10 days away from sites just closing all over the place because of isolation and quarantine restrictions, and lack of testing and everything else. So if just the guidance could get updated, it would be really appreciated.
I'll just pop in to say that's definitely underway. And at the governor's briefing, he said that I think they had something like 700,000 tests that they were delivering via OSPI to local school districts to make sure that they did have the testing capacity that they needed to stay open.
Thank you.
Which is great for the schools, but that we don't get those. And so that means that the kids that we don't have an opportunity to maybe serve because our staff aren't able to get tested.
Yeah, why don't you follow up and we'll make sure if there's specific language that needs to be included in that we are aware of it.
Thank you. Not to get the boxing gloves on, but there's a question. With the past nearly 2 years of executive emergency powers being utilized in our state, what thoughts do you have to revise how this may be revised to be a bit more representative or to create limits?
I'm stepping on Alex again. You go first this time, Alex.
All right, I'll give you a chance to respond to me this time. So, one thing I think is often missed in this discussion is that emergency proclamations that come from the governor's office that last for more than 30 days have to be signed off on by the four corners, which means the House Democrats, the House Republicans, the Senate Democrats, and the Senate Republicans. The emergency orders that we've been operating under really have had to work through that process that includes bipartisan, bicameral engagement. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the way that that process has worked, and I don't see a deep need for reforming this time.
So I will say that's partially correct. So there are two types of orders that the governor can make. Some of them are reviewable and some of them are not. And it really doesn't matter if every decision the governor made, I agreed with 100% or you agreed with 100%. That's not the point of whether the decisions are good or bad. And nobody is arguing that the governor should not have emergency executive powers. That's an important tool. All our side of the aisle is saying is that after a certain amount of time, 30 days seems to be reasonable, the legislature ought to have the opportunity to review all of those decisions. And one of the biggest errors, I think, in the legislation that we made a couple of sessions ago is we didn't provide for an opportunity for the legislature to weigh in as when the emergency is over. That's why we're out here at almost 700 days of the governor's emergency powers. And I think we're only one of 4 states where that is still going on. I think that we need to fix that and bring the legislature back into the picture, because when I'm asked by my constituents, what are you doing to weigh in? The answer has been nothing for almost 700 days. We've been isolated, and that's just not how government is supposed to work. Now, Alex is correct. A majority of the governor's proclamations have to go between the 4 corners and get agreement. And we've agreed on many, many things, but just because you agree doesn't make the process right. We need to fix the process so the people are brought back into it, and that's the legislature, because we represent you. Senator Linda Wilson has a bill that would just make all of the proclamations reviewable by the legislature within 30 days. And I think it's perfectly reasonable. I'll be supporting that.
Thank you both on that. Jones Atterbury, you had a question earlier. You probably gave up on us, but if you'd like to ask, please do so.
Yes, I did a little bit. You know, the housing, of course, is my concern, along with transportation and recreation and Skagit County. I'm 71 years old. I've been here a long, long time in Skagit County. I've seen a lot of great growth, and I want to thank Senator Wagner for his vision when he was mayor over in Cedar Woolley, because Cedar Woolley, you know, has really stepped up and become the housing capital right now of Skagit County, and all the new construction and the zoning that's taken place in order for housing to actually take place, and the number of apartments that are going in for beginning families and singles. And, you know, I'm not so concerned about the young people here in Skagit County, except, you know, we do need housing of some sort. We need jobs before we need housing. You know, again, when we were all young, we roommated, we'll be 4 or 5 of us in a house, or, you know, so, you know, when we say young, I think we should decide, is that 32? Because it's not 20. You know, most 20-year-olds do not have housing, except for maybe apartment with a bunch of friends. So, and again, you know, when we look at utilities and city fees and those, you know, it's $30,000 to $50,000 before you even order your building package. So we do know that land costs and development costs that the cities, counties, PUDs charge all implement what's going to be built on those lots, whether it's a 30-foot lot or a 12,000 square foot lot. It doesn't matter the size. It depends on what it's going to cost before you build. And there is no builder, unless there's some real incentives like what there was back in the early 70s with those 504s, 235s, those things, those 3-bedroom, 1-bath ramblers. That was my first house in Cedar Woolley, 1976. You know, that was a government subsidy. But Dujardin and those guys, ones who lived here, understand those names. They're the ones that built those beginning homes. But, you know, the cities and their zonings, we went from, 30-foot lots to 60 to 7,500, and then 9,400, and then 12,500 square foot lots in every one of our cities, you know, back in those, 70s, 80s, and 90s, then we found out, geez, we can't do that anymore because of land costs. And
Jones, let me slow you down. Jones, let me slow you down a little bit there.
Yeah,
those are really good points about the cost and the changes that have made it difficult for housing to be built. I think but would any legislators like to address that? It really, truly is a key issue for our communities and our businesses.
Well, I can step in there. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
This is the point I've been making all the way along. We can't just depend on those who are in the business of building homes to answer this problem. Because anybody who's in business knows that if we don't make money in our business, we don't remain in business very long. That's pretty simple arithmetic. But zoning and thinking outside of the box on zoning is incredibly important. And we need to reassess our zoning within the urban growth areas, because that's where the urban services are, and that's where we can affordably extend those services, to look at increasing the density. And Senator Loveland mentioned it, others have mentioned it. We have to really begin to look hard at that. There are a lot of factors here. Zoning's one of them. The cost of materials is one of them. When I started farming, concrete was 43 bucks a yard. I think we bought a load the other day, it was 105. So all of these costs have increased. So we've got to do it more efficiently. And honestly, a lot of that is simply increasing density and increasing height. And if we look at density, we can look at apartments, but we look at condos, townhomes, that kind of thing as well. A lot of older homeowners would take the chance, or would take the opportunity, better word, to move into a townhome or a condominium, and then that home is freed up for others. So it isn't just putting all of these who are needing homes in those structures, it's giving that opportunity. We need a wide range of opportunity for housing, and then we need to reassess whether the zoning, I mean, we all know that in a lot of cases, a lot of brick and mortar is no longer in existence. When is it going to be needed again? Do we need all these big malls with the huge parking lots, or is that a thing of the past? I'm not saying that that's the answer, but we've got to start thinking outside of the box in providing this. Because I'll tell you what, extending urban services, especially if you're in a floodplain in Skagit County, or whatever, is not the answer toward answering this long-term problem. And it's about giving people the opportunity to make a choice where they want to live and what they can afford to live sustainably. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for the excellent and comprehensive response. We are over time. I don't mind going a little longer, but is there anything that we haven't covered? Anything from my chamber partners and my friend John Sternlick at EDASC? Anything you want to add or ask? See, I told you I'd put somebody on the spot. The opportunity is how I should have put it.
Just thank you to everybody for all the hard work you do, both the members and the staff on our behalf, and trying to make things better for all of us. Everything that was mentioned was wonderful. The only thing I didn't hear about, unless I missed it, was childcare. So that's a big issue for workers and therefore for employers. And this COVID crisis in employment terms has hit women with much more impact than men in the workplace. Kind of opposite from the 2008 recession. And childcare is probably the main reason for that. So anything we can do to make more spots available, to make them higher quality, to train a workforce to work in that field, all those things we can do to make those things possible will be helpful.
So I'll jump in there quick. We've passed significant investment, both in subsidization for childcare, but also subsidizing health insurance for childcare providers. We did that last session. I would love to say that we passed these and immediately it has its impact. I was speaking, because that's part of my bailiwick, to the insurance pool the other day for the state, and they figure that there's a rough estimate 12,000 childcare providers that could help with this insurance. There's only 600 of them have signed up. So getting the information out, getting these things on the road, making it work is a challenge. We're working that way. the caveat to this will be, just like all areas, we're short of employees. There aren't the people. It isn't like you could go out tomorrow and hire, 5,000 more people to provide childcare. Also, the state has some responsibility into this because we have put some rather strict rules in place which have eliminated some smaller childcare providers. So we haven't been a help in this process, but we are working towards that. But unfortunately, none of us possess a magic wand to make it all go away today.
Right, and to paraphrase Representative Gilday on housing, this is going to have lots and lots of different solutions, some large and some small, because there are lots of facets to this problem.
John, thank you for that question. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
very
And
important.
Andy, thanks to all the chambers for putting this on. This is so great to do it countywide.
Our pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Thank you to the legislators for participating. We really appreciate the relationship that we have with you. In a county of our size, if we can't be neighbors and friends, something is not working right. But in fact, here it is working right. And we really, really appreciate it. So thank you for participating. We'll be in touch. Please do so yourself. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. And I don't know, go do something good today. Thanks, everybody.